Hello everyone. What would you do if someday we have a method of electric power generation that has no disadvantages at all, but only advantages? Even if such an optimal method of electric power generation were developed, I would not support relying 100% on that method alone. Why is that? Today, to explain why, let us consider the optimal power supply structure in Japan by examining advantages and disadvantages of each power generation source and fuel type in relation to geopolitical risks, price, CO2 emissions, and other factors. First, let's look at thermal power generation. The advantage of thermal power generation is the high level of power generation technology based on its long history. Japan's thermal power generation is at the top of the world with the thermal efficiency rate of over 60%. It also has a high capacity to adjust to the amount of electricity used, and this capacity is becoming more and more important as the ratio of renewable energy increases. On the other hand, its weakness lies in its fuel side, which emits CO2. Gas-fired power plants emit less CO2 than coal-fired power plants, but they still emit some CO2. In addition, since the fuel must be imported, security risks are unavoidable. Prices also rise and fall. Next is nuclear power. Its advantage is that it can generate large amount of electricity and does not emit CO2. It can withstand a certain degree of geopolitical risk because once the fuel is replaced, power can be generated for about a year. On the other hand, there is a public concern about safety. The final waste disposal method has not yet been decided. Among renewable energy sources, the advantages of hydropower are its environmental friendliness, which emits no CO2, and its ability to store electric power from pumped storage hydropower generation. Hydroelectric power is a highly environmentally friendly method of electric power generation that does not use fossil fuels because it utilizes the drop in water from a dam to its fall from high point to a low point to turn a water wheel to generate electricity. In addition, pumped storage power plants, of which there are many in Japan, can play the role of a huge storage battery because they can pump up water during times when there is a surplus of electricity and generate electricity during times when there is a shortage. With the expansion of renewable energy, such power generation adjustment capability will become more and more necessary. On the other hand, the problem is that there are not many possible sites in Japan where more hydroelectric power plants can be built. There is room to develop smaller scale hydropower, but not much overall. The advantage of other renewable sources such as solar power, wind power, is that they are environmentally friendly and do not emit CO2. Another advantage is that there is no security risk since the renewable plants are basically located in Japan. In addition, it has the advantage of being inexpensive to generate electricity once the facilities are built, since no fuel costs are required. On the other hand, disadvantage is that electricity cannot be generated when needed because because it is left up to the weather. Therefore, even if facilities are built, a large amount of electricity cannot be generated. In Japan, for example, the utilization ratio of solar power facilities is estimated to be about 12%. Onshore wind power is about 20%, and offshore wind power is about 30%. Since thermal and nuclear power plants can operate 24 hours a day for a given period of time, it would need 8 times as much solar power facilities, 5 times as much onshore wind power facilities, and 3 times as much offshore wind power to generate the same amount of electricity as thermal and in nuclear power plants. It also costs more to maintain power generation facilities to back up when the sun does not shine and the wind does not blow. The increase in renewable energy will create difficult challenges in balancing the supply and demand of electricity. As described above, each electric power generation method and fuel type has its advantages and disadvantages. Unfortunately, there is no single optimal power source. Safety is basic premise, but the superiority depends on whether it is considered from the perspective of energy security, environmental friendliness, or economics. These are called S plus 3 E's. Since S plus 3 E's are all important in the basic energy policy of Japan, I believe that narrowing down to any one method is not a wise choice. This is a lesson learned from the experiences of the oil crisis and the nuclear accident. In Japan, various power sources like sports team work as a team to support a stable supply of electricity. The more options we have, the better. On top of that, I think the best approach is to find the optimal balance between these options, depending on the fuel prices and international situation at the time. Of course, there is a possibility that the disadvantages of each option will be overcome to some extent by future technological development and the international situation. And therefore, their superiority will also change. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do not agree we should rely 100% only on one method of power generation, even if we were to obtain a method that has no disadvantage at all, but only advantages. The oil crisis occurred suddenly. Tsunami and the nuclear accident were also sudden. Russian invasion of Ukraine was also an unthinkable outrage in the 21st century. It is impossible to predict the future completely. So I believe that it is essential to have as many options as possible and to configure our power supply with a variety of sources to respond to crisis flexibly. Everyone, stay curious about energy. Thank you very much.